You're muted.
I needed to have that workshop on Zoom. I was wondering, would you like me to introduce the winner of the award now?
Sure.
Delightful. I'd be delighted to do that because I have to tell you, Theresa, that was so empowering and exciting to hear that. The best way to start, the more sort of technical evidence part of the presentation, is to tell you what the award that was given to somebody who, when given the technical evidence about how you can make your life more sustainable, how they translated that into something that was inspiring, engaging, and made sense. And there was a contest around it. And so could I have the final slide that shows our winner, please? Voila, the winner is Ms. Paula Bernasconi. And we want to show her video so that you get a sense for that. But just to let you know, it's taking evidence to action. And congratulations, Paula.
If I didn't have you, thought I had nothing to lose, but that's not the truth. I don't know what I'd do. If I didn't have you, even as the words came out, as they fall, I want to take them back. I know I let you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I'm sure if you were, not on Zoom and not at a conference and you were just looking at this on your phone, it would even have more of an impact. Could we move to the next slide? And it's great that we started out with that, because the challenge we have as, the UN is that we look at the evidence, we look at what the trends are, but, the challenge is that we have to translate that into action. And that's a lot about what our intervention is today. We're going to set the stage for the work that's happening to give you a sense that in making impactful change, you need to know what the evidence is, so that even though change can be good for itself, taking impactful action, given where we are in the place with the planet, is we really need to everybody be taking the same critical actions. Could I see the next slide, please? Santiago, thank you. So I also want to thank upfront, a big thank you for SDSN. It is such a pleasure to be here. They're a long-term partner with us on enhancing understanding and action around the Sustainable Development Goals. And Lila Ghaffar and I are here from the United Nations Environment Program. We are the UN's environmental conscience, and UNEP works to monitor and address changes to our planet, looking at the nexus around climate, nature, and pollution. So basically that translates into delivering on the SDGs. In fact, some would say only the environmental ones, but we think with the underpinning, it's probably most of them. We're going to outline the emerging evidence around sustainable living, or applying a people lens to sustainability, because keep in mind that a lot of the conversation dialogue around sustainability uses vocabulary about things like resource flows, like water, energy, materials, and their impacts, climate, biodiversity, or pollution. But the reality is people don't wake up in the morning and think about the environment. But COVID made people, and actually the world, re-examine how we live. It made us rethink about our healthcare and the interlinked systems that help us meet our daily needs and live our aspirations. And just as Theresa mentioned, we were all caught out, trying to get to work if we were going to school, how we couldn't have face-to-face engagement. We had to shift focus on how to more closely look at the food we eat, the stuff we buy, how we move around, how we use our money, the fun things we do. Is it really important? And what is it doing to the planet and to us? Questions like what's well-being and doesn't everyone have a right to meeting basic needs became part of the conversation. So in essence, lifestyle changes are key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Like an old sustainability professional like myself, it's really interesting that the SDGs, it's for the first time that there is the term sustainable lifestyles in both 4, which is education, and 12. And so in essence, when you look at the lifestyle domains, how we live, and it's food, mobility, housing, and leisure, it crosses most of the SDGs. So lifestyle changes can be seen as maybe the most impactful way to have progress on delivering on the SDGs. So in essence, we feel that SDG 12 really underpins our success on whether we're going to make it with realizing the SDGs. Could I see the next slide, please? So what is the evidence saying? We know now that households account for up to 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. The decisions that are made in households are around nutrition, housing, mobility, consumer goods, leisure, and services. Now, people living in houses can make some decisions based on what they know, what they have, but some of it is based on what they have available to them. So there's also a role not only for the household or the individual, but also the community or the surroundings of them to offer the solutions that they can meet their lives in a more sustainable way. The next slide, please. We also know, and if we keep going down, you're gonna see the rest of this slide shows that even if you look at 2030 or 2050 targets, developing as well as emerging economies are going to need to rethink how they meet their basic needs, given what we see happening with the climate as well as biodiversity. Next slide, please. The evidence also, and I'm sure many of you are familiar, next slides, are familiar with the fact that there's a huge equity issue around here. Those that are driving the most emissions are quite well off, and those who are paying the price and not necessarily consuming as they need to are on the bottom. Now, what's interesting about this equity issue is not only is it developed versus developing countries or value chains, but the aspirations that are feeding these consumption patterns drive most of the planet. Even those who have very little or are coming in as middle-class consumers have aspirations about how to spend their time, their money, and their energy. And that tends to be driven by global processes, as well as local and cultural elements. Next slide, please. So we know in general, all of us, because we're in sustainability, about some of these elements. We know about ecosystems, we know about climate change, we know about resource use. The key point is when you look at 2 to 3 billion new consumers coming online, most of them are young and in urban environments. It's not about a developing or developed country context. It's about urban contexts, and it's about young consumers who today are driving trends, but will be tomorrow's decision makers. And what do we know about this group? We know that this group also gets most of its information from social media. Now, imagine in lockdown, Theresa talked about how her platform managed to connect the world. This is also the connection that will help us look and redefine, if we can, how we're consuming and living better and lighter. Next slide, please. So just to take a step back, I've been talking about aspirations. Aspirations for what we want have been in place for quite a while. The advertising agencies and marketing spend $600 to $700 billion a year expressing the values of their products. And in the 1950s, there was a big shift from selling goods and services based on what it was actually made of to what it could actually do for you, a dream. And that continued sort of dream of a new life or of a better life continues to run and fuel a lot of the consumption. But what has this done in terms of our resources and impact on the planet? Next slide, please. I'm looking at 2 different domains, not all of them. And you can put through, if you want, Santiago, go through all of the slide. We know around food that we all think about having as much food, it's better, it's healthy. We all aspire to have that, changing what kind of food we have when we do well. But the reality we also know is that a third of the food doesn't make it to the stomachs it's intended for, that people are going hungry, and that there are health issues around obesity as an example. But when you look at the science, what you can do about it, if you put up the last one, Santiago, on this one, we know that the science says, if you swap the proteins in what you're eating, if you use all your food, and if you grow your own, that you can make a huge impact. That's the work that UNEP has done, is to translate it into, and it's not just us, we do it all in partnership, into these three key messages. Next slide, please. Now, this is a big one, fashion. I know everyone in sustainability knows about sustainable fashion. We know the good things, the bad things. We know that fashion is sold to be cool, to fit in. There's always a thing about new is better, and that there's something about sustainable fashion that it doesn't necessarily meet what we want, even though maybe people in the event this weekend are a lot more aware of it. But the average person is not at that place. And we know the consequences, that people are throwing out clothes they've never worn, that it's a hugely polluting sector in general, and that there are issues not only about pollution, but about people. And the final, Santiago, there's the solutions, that if you look at impactful actions, is think about what it is, your image you want to have. In addition to covering you for the environment around you, which is the purpose of clothing, is what it is that you want to communicate about yourself. When you look at your image, do you think about what it is that you want to represent you? Is it new clothes? Is it shared clothes? Your image, how can you cobble it together in order to put together the look you want, but also to go beyond buying, to not buy the same as before, but buy better, and then to make sure it stays in the market as long as possible. Next slide, please. So, unfortunately, all those lovely slides that Theresa showed in the beginning on the part of her engagement with her platforms, this slide represents what 50 to 100 experts engaged from around the world took 2 years to put together, which is the key evidence that we know around what it is about, what is sustainable living, what affects us. And the thing that it's important to highlight these points, because what we know about sustainable living is what we hear in the media, through friends, through some education, but it isn't necessarily curated by evidence. What we know is that there is no one sustainable lifestyle. It's embedded in social norms and where we physically are. And we know that money doesn't necessarily equal happiness, once you've met a certain basic living standard. We know that all incomes are affected by aspirations. And we know a big thing that sustainability people don't like to hear is that people, given the right information, don't always take the right action. We know that people make decisions based on price, availability, and whether it's trendy or cool. And we know that this 2 to 3 billion new consumers I keep hammering away at, because it's going to be youth and today's trendsetters and tomorrow's decision makers that have a chance to kind of really declick the current consumption and production patterns. Now, all of this is more the science on it, and I'm going to hand it over now to Lila, who's going to show you more about a product that we put together to inspire and engage. But remember, we're the UN. Our job is to do the evidence, show where it's going, and make policy recommendations. We look to others like you guys to be able to help get that science out there. So with that, Lila, do you want to take on?
Yeah, thanks a million, Garrett, and thanks so much, Theresa and Santiago and everybody for having us. You can go ahead to the next slide. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Anatomy of Action, and it was born out of a collaboration with the School of Disruptive Design, and it contributes to the One Planet Network Sustainable Lifestyles and Education Program. So the AOA set out to research and develop an action map that connects tangible everyday actions to SDGs. It's done that through 5 domains: food, stuff, move, money, and fun. And since 2019, the AOA has been a social media toolkit, but also a framework that has translated the science behind SDG 12 and fostered holistic conversations and discussions about sustainable living and what the sustainable living looks like all around the world. Next slide, please. So it's also home to a huge library of action cards and fact cards about sustainable lifestyles, the science, and then the actions we can all take, the everyday actions we can take to have the highest impact. And over the next year, so we had the pleasure of partnering with SDSN on our most recent challenge, which had a reach of just over 4 million altogether. And over the next year, we'll continue to host and support in-sector events, competitions like the One Paula one, and general sustainability discussions in the run-up to Stockholm Plus 50. And if you go to the next slide. So just, yeah, so the most important part of this work is tapping into the energy of youth and young people all over the world. And that's why we use social media, and it will be the youth that set the trends. So that's that. And oh yeah, and please follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. You can find, I'll put it in a link in the chat. And yeah, and get in touch if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas around any of this. And I'm going to hand the floor back. I'm going to hand it back over to Garrett to make some final points. Thank you so much.
So Santiago, could I see the last slide, please? So I just wanted to highlight that for all of you who have that sort of eco-nerd inner person who wants to know more about the science, which would be great, there's more information here. And highlight that one of the challenges we have is that the energy around how we can live better and lighter is huge. It's enormous. We're so excited with the group that's here. Look at what the evidence said are the elements we really need to push as a planet in order to make the changes we need. The challenges that we've seen when we look at people taking action is that not all action is going to be equated with making impact. And given the situation where we are now, we really need to align as much we can. We're really, really pleased to be here, and thank you so much, SDSN, and we look forward to hearing the other speakers as well. Thank you.
Wow, Garrett and Lila, I truly believe that your message was so convenient to the whole purpose of the summit. We truly need to action towards the goals, and keep going. Thank you. So now I would like to go and give the word to two of the members of our most recent partnership, Social Shifters. I would like to ask Mr. David Haddow and Miss Tegan Samija to address their speech.